Hello and welcome to DTV, your source for news and information about the Knox County Democratic Party. I'm Michael Davis, and I'll be your host for today's program segment with Jane George, candidate for the Tennessee Senate District 6. This August, voters will choose a Democratic candidate for District 6 in the Democratic primary, and the winner will take on incumbent Republican Becky Duncan Massey. Democrats are looking to flip this important seat, and today we look at one of the candidates hoping to do just that in November, Jane George. Jane, thank you so much for being here with us today, and welcome to DTV.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for doing this for us.
You're very welcome. As our viewers can continue to tell, we're still operating on Zoom as the pandemic continues to unfold. So that, I'm sure, is having a big impact on your campaign. The primary is fast approaching, but the difficulties with the pandemic still remain. How has this affected your campaign and your outlook for your race up until August?
Well, I mean, running a campaign indoors is a challenge. And I think a lot of people are getting Zoom burnout, to be honest with you, or Zoom fatigue. You know, we're hearing a lot about that. And so this has been one way for us to be able to get our issues out there and to connect with people. Of course, calling and talking to people, phone banking is just as valid whether we're in a pandemic or not. So we're doing that, going at that hard. We've got some great volunteers that are helping with that. And we're just asking people, if you are in alignment with us, if you support us, then would you please take the next step to contact your friends and pass on my phone number and pass on the website and get information out there. We're also planning we're going to be doing once a week, it looks like, a show where we're going to go into each of the districts inside District 6. Mm-hmm. And highlight some of what's going on in those districts with regard to how they're coping. What are some of the challenges they're facing? Maybe talk to some local heroes and have an opportunity to also connect to candidates that are running in those districts as well. So we're really looking forward to having something that'll look a little different than just us in boxes,
Right.
But still get information out. Yeah.
Okay. So unlike many primaries this coming August, this one is contested. So it's very important that people pay attention to your race and what's going on. So tell our voters a little bit about what are some of the chief things that motivated you to seek this office and how your background fits into that.
Well, I mean, I think we're all supposed to do some kind of public service, however that shows up in our lives. And if we're doing it in a way that has integrity with how we live our lives and with what we value, then this is one way to do it. And for me, this is in alignment with who I am. I have to say that I am greatly disturbed by the amount of divide that is happening in our country, in our state, even in our local communities. And that's something that I feel very strongly is an important part of what's going to come next in our political system is a healing process. And that healing process means that we have to be able to listen to each other. We have to realize that we have way more in common than we have that's different. And in the political situation here in the state of Tennessee, at the legislative level anyway, it's going to be the only way we're going to get things done as Democrats is to be able to reach across the aisle. So I studied science. My undergrad and graduate degrees were in biology, and I learned critical thinking and how to look at things without a lot of emotion and to be more objective and to look at and ask the hard questions in terms of what is the expected outcome and how would you get there and how would you plan to study to see if you can get there. And that's I feel like one of my strengths is bringing people together, being able to look at things critically and trying to put aside whatever the title is or the number is that's behind our names.
Right. So with the ongoing pandemic issue, a lot of people do see this as something that is apparently continuing to divide, not just the nation, but people in our community. Is it also an opportunity to bring people together? And if so, how do you think that you could go about helping that as a state senator or in that kind of leadership role in the legislature?
I think if we're focusing on what the needs of our communities are, and we're not getting lost in a lot of theoretical, perhaps unexplained theories about what's happening right now, but really caring for each other, being kind, being aware that this is very hard on businesses. So finding ways to support businesses that are in unconventional ways. These are things that are going to be very important in restructuring and rebuilding our economy. And people from both parties own businesses. People from both parties like music. So we're going to have to find ways that are going to bring us together to get through this. And I think, again, it's really going to be about finding common goals, common issues that so that we're not giving a lot of focus and attention. We are very divided, and we're very divided even in how we perceive the pandemic. And because we get our information from different sources, it can be very hard and very contested to have a conversation to say, look, let's just look at the science, or let's just look at the reality of things. Let's look at just being kind and compassionate, where our kindness and compassionate to others is a lack of civil liberties. And so I think we have to acknowledge that people feel that way. And then we have to I think once we can acknowledge that we can say, but you have to wear pants when you go into the grocery store. And so is that contesting your civil liberties? There are things that we do in our culture that are required for the greater good. And this happens to be one of those, in my opinion.
Okay. How do you see education in Tennessee playing into this? And I realize that's kind of a long-term view sort of question, but is it playing out here? And are we on the right track in the future and making sure that education is the priority, or is a priority in Tennessee?
Well, there are no uniform solutions at this point, as you know. I mean, there are different districts that are making, or at least looking at, different pathways and how we should solve this. So I think if it was an easy fix, then it would be done. It's not an easy fix, but it is absolutely having an impact on kids, and especially in families that might have one computer at home and have 3 children, and someone might be working from home using that computer. We have families that don't have access to internet. We need to investigate broadband again. I know it's not new, but we need to really take another look at that, as not just through education, but also businesses are making decisions to stay and continue to do work online and not be in brick and mortar. So at least some their principals may be working from home. So these are issues that we have to look at with education. Now, education is a big deal. You got to have an educated society if you want to have a successful society. And the kids that we're educating today are going to be our leaders in not that long, 3 decades away from when we're talking about children that are still in elementary school. And those children need to have access to great teachers and well-funded classrooms. They need to have good food available, and it needs to be quality food. They need to be able to have the space to learn and grow and expand. And that means we have to have reasonable class sizes. We have to pay our teachers. And it's interesting because in the state of Tennessee, there's 2 different ways that we look at education in our ranking nationally. We rank 38th in the nation in one ranking system, and we rank 45th in the nation in another. The 45th ranking has to do with how much we spend per pupil here in the state of Tennessee. So we can't get much worse when it comes to how we compare with the national amounts of money spent per student. The other ranking is specific to how well children do from kindergarten through 8th grade in national testing. The next thing they look at is how many graduate from high school. And then the next criteria for that evaluation is how many go to college. So we're actually ahead of ourselves in our ranking in terms of what we're spending. Tennessee tends to be a very fiscally tight state legislatively, and as the federal government is deconstructing, more and more power is coming back to the states, which means we are going to have more and more responsibility to make those decisions. With freedom comes responsibility. And if we're given that freedom to self-regulate at the state level, we're going to be responsible for doing something about our educational systems. I love that we have free education for some when we're looking at higher educations. And at UT, they're talking about having programs as well at the 4-year level. And so I think there's some really cool stuff going on here. And I think but we have a lot of work to do when it comes to providing funds and having a good education. It all overlaps. You know, if you want to attract industry and you want to bring more money into our economy and you don't want to raise taxes, so we need to bring more industry here. Well, if you're looking at corporate satellites or big companies like Google or Yahoo or those companies coming and setting up a space here, they are going to require that there's good education. They're going to require that the environment's healthy.
Right.
They actually, a lot of these companies actually require that you have at least 20% of your energy is renewable.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So we have work to do if we want to continue and grow and expand our economy, specifically as we come into a recovery situation.
Right.
And we need to generate more income.
And quickly on that note, I mean, healthcare is such a prominent thing in everyone's mind right now. With education being so tightly tied to the economy, do you see Medicaid expansion as a similar issue?
Oh my gosh, well, you can't separate them. I mean, the reality is that not having Medicaid expansion is costing us a whole lot of money. And the argument that we can't afford it has not been proven to be accurate or true. Look at Arkansas, great example. So they didn't initially take the expansion. And then they did in 2017. So we had data from before and after to look at. And when we look at that data, what we see is that they saved enough money in their first year to be able to pay not just for that first year, the state side of it, but also the second and third year. So they saved money, you know, and everybody had insurance. I think what a lot of people don't realize is that Medicaid expansion is for working people. These are people that make too much money to get Medicaid, and they don't make enough money to qualify for the Affordable Care Act. So they're in that space in between, working class people. They have jobs. Again, this is all also tied to a living wage. So if you're in a situation where you're working full time and you don't make enough money to be able to do affordable care, and you're too much to make Medicaid, what's happening? What do you do when you go to work in terms of how much are you getting paid if you are working a full-time job?
Right.
Or for a lot of people, they're working 2 jobs because some of these big corporations don't want to pay for insurance.
Right.
So they keep you working at 32 hours or less. So there's a direct relationship to what's happening with Medicaid expansion and our budget, because it's costing us. You know, if someone's first visit to the doctor is the emergency room, it's a very expensive visit compared to if they just were able to see a physician in the early stages of problems. And this is also a COVID problem. Right. You know, right now we have free testing, but we still haven't quite sussed out who's going to pay for it if you have to get hospitalized and if you have to be, if you're put on a ventilator. We still don't really know. That stuff is still in conversation.
Exactly. A lot to be left to find out about this. The postmortem, so to speak, on this is going to be very telling, I imagine.
Absolutely.
In about a minute that we have left, Jane, how can people get in touch with your campaign to let them know so they can volunteer or find out more about you?
I have a website. It's www.votejanegeorge.com, and you can volunteer there. We are absolutely looking for people to help us with text banking, phone banking, things you can do from home, not even using your own phone number. And then you can follow me on Twitter, which is Vote Jane George and the number 1, and on Facebook, Jane George, Tennessee, TN, Senator District 6.
Okay. Well, Jane, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's been a pleasure talking with you about these issues and introducing you to the DTV viewers. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Any last words that you have for our viewers?
I think that the most important thing the takeaway that I want people to have from me and my campaign is that I really want this job. And I want this job because I believe I can be effective and because I love Tennessee. And it is so important that we get ourselves onto a new pathway. We've got to clean the cobwebs out and start new.
All right. Well, Jane, thank you so much. Pleasure talking with you today. And thank you so much, all of our viewers, for watching DTV. I'm Michael Davis, and we'll see you next time.